You're watching Euronews now. I'm Mariam Zadi, and these are the headlines this hour. The US Supreme Court overturns a landmark judgment, Roe v. Wade, meaning US states can ban abortions. After Thursday's euphoria, it was a bump back to planet Earth as EU leaders tackled the cost of living crisis, soaring inflation, energy and food security on the final day of the EU summit. A blow for Ukraine. Troops are forced to retreat from the besieged eastern city of Severodonetsk to avoid being encircled by advancing Russian forces.
Here in the Cube, we'll take a closer look at a misleading TV news report that states that thousands of Belgians are against aid for Ukraine.
Good evening. Roe v. Wade, the US Supreme Court decision, which for half a century has underpinned the constitutional right to abortion in America, has been overturned. The court's justices voted 6-3 against the right, with all three of the justices appointed by former President Donald Trump voting to strike down abortion. It will now be an issue decided by individual states, with about half expected to ban or severely restrict the procedure for women. Earlier, US President Joe Biden said he will do everything in his power to protect women from states where abortions will be banned to travel to states where it will remain legal.
So, if a woman lives in a state that restricts abortion, the Supreme Court's decision does not prevent her from traveling from her home state to the state that allows it. It does not prevent a doctor in that state from treating her. As the Attorney General has made clear, women must remain free to travel safely to another state to seek care they need. My administration will defend that bedrock right.
Well, earlier I spoke to Kimberly Mutchison, the co-dean and professor of law at Rutgers Law School. She said that the women who will be most affected by this move will be those that are poorer and who live in more rural areas. Take a look.
It's sort of devastating to me that my 14-year-old daughter is going to have fewer access to the right to terminate a pregnancy and fewer human rights in general than I have had growing into my adult life. So we are at a very, very dangerous point here in the United States today.
And what about then, I mean, this, of course, impacts all women, but what about the most vulnerable? Can you sum up how that's going to, affect them?
Sure. I mean, so, we just heard from President Biden saying, of course, that women need to be able to travel if they want to terminate a pregnancy, and states can't stop them from doing that. That assumes, of course, that somebody has the resources to travel out of state in order to terminate a pregnancy. And not all people are going to have that access. So I worry about women who are low income. I worry about women of color. I worry about women who live in rural communities who might have to travel for hundreds of miles in order to be able to access abortion. I worry about young women who tend to find out that they are pregnant further along into their pregnancy. So there are lots of folks for whom their vulnerability is exacerbated by this decision.
So given that context then, I mean, you brought up President Biden. He, of course, said that he's going to do everything in his power to help defend the right to abortion in states where, of course, it could be banned. But what protection can then be given in those states potentially?
Well, I mean, it's a state-by-state issue now, so states can decide, as many already have, right? I mean, just this week, we will probably see at least over a dozen states that have banned abortion, and in the next few weeks, we could have half of this country where abortion is no longer legal, and that's a real problem. So there are some things that can be done on the executive level in terms of expanding access to abortion on federal lands, making sure that states don't overstep their bounds in terms of what they can do. So, for instance, trying to, ban the use of pills that are used in abortion. So there are some things that can be done through the president's office, but the truth of the matter is that this is really going to be a state-by-state battle now.
Indeed. And staying with the president and also going to Nancy Pelosi, they both criticised this court ruling and the recent New York handgun ruling. They say they contradict each other. Do you see it that way? I can see you nodding.
I do see it that way, right? I mean, there's something very shocking about this idea of folks who are fighting for this culture of life at the same time that they are fighting for people to be able to have access to weapons of tremendous destruction. And I also want to note the hypocrisy of people who are fighting so dearly to end abortion in a country that has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. So caring about a fetus and not caring about the person who is trying to carry that baby to term, or who in this case is being forced to stay pregnant when she chooses not to. If that is the position that we want to take, then there are a lot more resources that should be put towards that kind of social safety net in this country.
Right, and just quickly, you brought up hypocrisy there, but abortion is, of course, a deeply divisive issue in the UK. How is this going to play out in the midterms?
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I definitely think that there are people who are going to be galvanized by what has happened here, that there are folks who thought, we're never going to get this far, that they will not take away a constitutional right, which is incredibly rare for a court to do, for the Supreme Court to do that. So I think it will play into the midterms. I'm just not sure how yet.
EU leaders have reconvened in Brussels to discuss energy and economy as the continent grapples with soaring inflation and a cost of living crisis. A day after celebrating Ukraine's candidate status, heads of state discuss cutting their dependence on Russian fossil fuels with a focus on alternative energy. Shona Murray reports.
Although EU leaders were still celebrating their decision to give Ukraine and Moldova candidate status, the second day of the European summit focused on the worrying economic situation across Europe. The war in Ukraine is significantly contributing to inflation growth, and heads of state and government are already working on the energy area to make sure gas storages within the EU will be full before the winter arrives.
This starts with being adequately prepared to deal with potential further disruptions in deliveries of Russian gas to Europe, and we are working hard on this. We have reviewed all the national emergency plans to help make sure everyone is ready for further disruptions. And we are working on a common European emergency demand reduction plan with industry, but also with the 27 member states.
At this point, 12 EU countries have either been totally or partially cut from Russian gas. And European leaders believe that Russian President Vladimir Putin could make things even worse in the coming weeks and months.
Given the energy issue and the clear decision of Putin to ramp up the energy crisis potentially for the winter in cutting gas supplies to Germany and other EU states. So we are looking at a very challenging winter in terms of the energy crisis, and that will have a follow-through in terms of famine and food.
Even if all EU member states agree on the problem, there's not such a common line on the response to adopt. Some countries, like Italy, are asking for a gas price cap. But the idea clashes with other member states who want to avoid any type of intervention in the markets. And the issue won't be on the table before September, which point it could be too late. Shona Murray, Euronews.
We spoke to Anne-Sophie Corbeau, who is the Global Research Scholar at Columbia's Centre on Global Energy Policy. Now, she said Europe is not receiving sufficient gas supplies to stock up for winter. Take a look.
This is a global problem for European Union because we have seen over the past few months the situation really deteriorating. 6 buyers, so 5 countries and 1 buyer in Germany have already been cut. And what we are seeing now is that the daily deliveries of Russian gas towards EU countries are at about a quarter of where they were before in 2021. So we don't have enough Russian gas coming to Europe in general in order to refill gas storage ahead of the winter. Because before we were seeing about 140 billion cubic meters of Russian gas coming. Some gas have been coming over the first month, but the real question is Gazprom or Putin going to cut all the Russian gas after July?
OK, so then paint that picture across Europe then. It's a race against time, of course, to fill these gas reserves. Can they do it?
That's indeed the key problem. The problem is that there is not enough capacity, import capacity, and there is not enough volumes in the world in order to replace these 140 billion cubic meters of pipeline gas. So in terms of LNG import terminals, we are constrained. This is why we are seeing a lot of initiatives in order to build new LNG import terminals, floating storage and regasification units. They will arrive probably by winter, but it may be too late. And also, I mean, the global LNG market is simply constrained. Already, we are taking LNG away from Asia. And unfortunately, we have also seen a big US LNG export plant, Freeport LNG, having an incident, and it's going to be at least 3 months offline. So it's really everything basically building up against Europe right now.
So what's your take then on the reversal back to coal? We've seen it with Germany and the Netherlands. Is it a needs must, or is it dragging Europe backwards?
It's absolutely a must. I mean, what people actually don't realize in terms of the power generation is that nuclear is done massively. Hydro is done as well. I mean, this is not something that people talk a lot about. So the increase in renewable wind and solar is not enough sufficient to actually replace both nuclear and hydro. So we need coal. I mean, coal is the only option if we don't have enough gas. This is absolutely fundamental. And I see other countries basically also going back to coal because there is not an alternative. We need power. And it's also very important that from now on, we are saving every kilowatt hours that we can, both for gas and for power.
So lots of issues then with the potential alternatives. So gas prices, they're likely to creep up further?
They will. I mean, the thing about gas prices right now is that they are not completely reflecting the fundamentals. There is a fear premium on top of that. So, I mean, you can see that every time something is happening on the market, the gas prices are spiking. So, and on top of that, I mean, the key problem for Europe and the world in general, because, I mean, the gas prices are also impacting other countries in the world, is that the market is going to be tight until at least 2025. Why? Because limited LNG export capacity additions are going to come to the market. In fact, one of the key new LNG export capacity was going to come from Russia. This one, as the Arctic 2 LNG, might actually be delayed or not even coming to the market, which is making this whole period, 22 to 25, even tighter.
OK, we'll take a short break here, but stay with us on Euronews. Lots more to come, including he might be all the way in Rwanda, but UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is back in the hot seat. Can he hang on? More after the break.